Y bueno, ya para irnos, jóvenes de preparatoria se preparan a esa edad para una carrera especialmente deliciosa. Son estudiantes del taller de artes culinarias de la escuela Miramesa. Los jóvenes chefs prepararon hoy platillos típicos de esta época decembrina, pues compartieron sus conocimientos y hasta dieron consejos y tips para una mejor preparación de estos platillos que de alguna manera son bien recurrentes y se cocinan en muchas casas en esta época de fin de año. Y lo que me llama mucho la atención, compañeros, es eso, que sean pues edad, adolescentes prácticamente, como que ya vayan definiendo un poco, ¿no?, lo que van a querer hacer.
Es que es precisamente...
Mira lo que hicieron en Univisión 17, mira que...
Ay, qué creativos. Es que es precisamente, Claudia, cuando creo que tienen más precisamente las habilidades para ser más creativos, por ejemplo, inventar cosas, inventar platillos con los sabores que ya tienen, que han conocido en sus familias o digo de sus diferentes culturas. Así que, pues muchas felicidades. Seguramente ellos van a ser los próximos chefs exitosos aquí, esperemos aquí en San Diego, ¿no?
Elías, conociéndolo, yo creo que le hubiera gustado a ver.
Lo que yo tengo que decir definitivamente es que como vemos en la semana...
Appreciate it. Well, this morning, Fox 5 reporter Jackie Wynn, she's going back to school. Students at Crawford High School. Let's see what she's up to this morning. Jackie Wynn, good morning to you.
Hello, Raul, and good morning, everyone. You know, I love going back to high school because you know why? I can just blend in with all of the students and no one would know the wiser. Yeah, we're live here at Crawford High School, and the school just recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. We're going to talk to you all about that. And not only that, but you know, the school was broken up into 4 different theme schools about 5 years ago. And this morning, we're going to be hanging out with students from the Multimedia and Visual Arts School. And take a look. They're setting up. We're going to have some neat things to show to you in about 30 minutes. And take a look at this painting right over here. I got to show you this one, Raul. Look how beautiful it is. This was done by one talented student. We're going to be talking to her later on as well. But you know, I have to tell you, all of these students, they have a lot of talent, but I have to tell you, Raul, my idea of art, let me show you right now. This is my idea of art. Raul, what do you think?
You can do better than that.
Which
You know,
one
I
do you
saw the stick figure coming a mile away. What are you doing? You're better than that.
You know, stick figures, that's what I learned when I was in high school. Let me tell you, these students here, man, they got the world at their oysters here. So we're going to be hanging out with them. We're going to be talking to them later on. So stay with us. I'm going to toss it back to you there in the studio.
Yeah, why don't you work on those stick figures a little bit? Thanks, Jackie. Thank you very much. Students at Crawford High School have hands-on experience with the arts. Fox 5 reporter Jackie Wynn live with them this morning, having a good time, hopefully working on those stick figures from earlier. Jackie.
Good morning, Raul. Good morning, everyone. You know, it's a great Friday here. We're live here at Crawford High.
Superintendent, you ready?
Might as well be.
Okay. 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 All the board members are present, so we have a quorum. We will stand to the Pledge of Allegiance at this time. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. Thank you. We have 3 items that we were looking at this afternoon. I will start with the first item, which is the A03, is a resolution to adopt the Public Agency Retirement Services Supplemental Early Retirement Plan for the eligible employees, and I think that's for OTBS. That is in our packets, board members. And if I could get a motion, I have a, okay, Mr. DeBeck.
Second.
And a second, Ms. Barrera. Any discussion?
Yeah, question.
Yes.
Okay, we are voting to adopt the PARS for eligible employees. It doesn't specify.
OTBS, The next one there, there you go, right there in your
Right
hand.
here?
Yes. We did the AASD, this is OTBS group now.
So this means that OTBS has been presented this and agreed to this?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and so we are just approving.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Please vote. That passes 5-0. The next item is clarification surrounding the new Title I funding guidelines. And I'm going to read verbatim from my script so I can make sure that we're clear today. On January 27, 2009, regular board meeting, the Board of Education, the board took action on 09-10 Title I eligibility ranking and participation to distribute the 09-10 Title I funds to schools based on scenario 4 in the staff report. That scenario provided that elementary, middle, and high schools with poverty levels 60 to 100% will receive Title I funding, and that funding would be based upon equal per pupil allocation of $432 per student. At the February 10th regular scheduled board meeting, we reconsidered this prior action, and majority of the board supported changing the 09-10 distribution of Title I funds to elementary, middle, and high schools with poverty levels of 40% and above, rather than 60% and above. However, based upon the uncertainty during the motion, amendment, and voting process, it was not clear whether the board majority endorsed a per pupil allocation based on tiered structure or a flat structure. Specifically, it currently is not clear whether the majority of the board endorsed the tiered scenario in scenario 1 of the staff report or the flat rate in scenario 2. This agenda item is to allow the board to resolve this uncertainty. I'm going to read the motion Dr. Evans presented on February 10th meeting, which was seconded by Ms. Nakamura. Then I will read the amendment of that motion, which was offered by Ms. Nakamura and seconded by Mr. DeBeck. Then we will vote whether Dr. Evans' motion should be amended to support Mrs. Nakamura's. If the board votes in favor of that amendment, we would then vote on the amended motion. If the board votes against the amendment, we would then vote on Dr. Evans' original motion.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
We already voted on Nakamura's motion. What we didn't do was vote on the whole motion, so that revisiting the vote is not necessary if the original vote was valid, and it was. So therefore, the procedure should be to proceed on the main motion, which was amended by Captain Swan.
Okay, that's what, I mean, and we're here to,
Could we ask the attorney to
Yeah,
help us?
I can speak to that. After listening to the audio 3 times, it wasn't clear to me that all 5 of you understood that you were voting on the amendment itself. And that's why, in an exercise of caution, would be a revote on the amendment. But if it's the sense of the board that the amendment has already been voted on and been approved, then the only thing left to do would be to vote on the amended motion.
Yeah.
The record shows that it was
your mic is not on, Mr. DeBeck.
Therefore, since there was a vote on the amendment that was recorded on the machine, I'm assuming that that's a valid amendment to the motion. And now we have the main motion, and if you want to revisit that because it wasn't voted on, that's fine with me.
That's, my understanding
If that's the
of it.
sense of the board, then that's my recommendation to go ahead and do that. Just vote on the amended motion.
Okay. Is that the sense of the board? I have 2 people saying that it was okay. Dr. Evans, what do you think?
Well, my main point was that we did not. My main point was that we did not follow through on the
amendment.
voting on the original, or on the motion I put forward as amended or otherwise, and I was just deferring to Mr. Breezy in terms of whether the board was clear on what we were voting on at that particular point.
Sometimes the board isn't clear on what it's voting on anyway, but
Okay.
that has nothing to do with the actual vote it was cast.
True.
Are we allowed to reconsider a vote on the amendment?
If you're in the affirmative, I suppose you are.
And you were in the affirmative.
Okay, I would like to reconsider a vote on the amendment.
Okay, so let me read what...
You have to vote on that.
Okay, okay.
Vote on reconsidering?
We have to vote on reconsideration.
Okay.
Let me read out what Dr. Evans originally proposed and what the amendment was, and if you feel the amendment was correct, then the reconsideration vote will be taken. Okay, I just want to read it so we have it clear this time. Dr. Evans made the following motion, second by Ms. Nakamura, for the 09-10 use Scenario 1 status quo tiered plan. Number 2, additional funds that may come in from the federal stimulus program be used by the district directed to the places of greatest need as determined by the administration. Number 3, the staff will provide a report on Title I of what has happened this year and what's going to happen next year. And there's a special report on the 40 to 60 schools on how they can get the operating funds they need to cover the costs to make a smooth transition and not lose any of their useful programs. Then Ms. Nakamura offered the following statement, seconded by Mr. DeBeck. Replace item 1 in Dr. Evans' motion, Scenario 1, tiered plan with Scenario 2, staff recommendation. And so at this point, I think that it is the board consensus that that was a valid vote, and that vote is up for reconsideration. My question to Mr. Breesy is, we do the reconsideration of the amended vote before we go to the original motion.
Yes, you need a second on the motion for reconsideration.
Okay. Is there a second for the reconsideration motion?
I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We're voting whether or not to reconsider the amendment, which would be for Scenario 2, staff recommendation, as well as the other 3 items listed by Dr. Evans. Is there any discussion on that?
This is just simply to allow people to reconsider.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Please vote. Reconsideration passes 3-2 on the amendment.
On the main motion.
That was on...
No, I said,
Yeah,
on the
no.
main motion, I have a
Okay.
comment.
Okay. So,
Now we go to the amendment.
We're still debating the main motion then.
no, we're going, okay.
The
No.
main
Vote
motion is the base,
Okay.
we reconsidered the motion,
the amendment
the amendment, and we're basically
Back
starting back
to
at
the main motion. Right.
All right? And I
Okay.
would like you to read the
I'm gonna-
provisions in the main motion.
I'm gonna do that
Some of
now.
which I believe are illegal.
Okay, I'm going to read that now again. Okay. For the 09-10 school year, we will use Scenario 1, which is status quo tiered plan. Additional funds that may come in from the federal stimulus program to be used by the district directed to the places of greatest need as determined by the administration. That was number 2.
Hold it. Okay, hold that idea.
Okay,
That
Let's start there.
directing by the administration of the use of Title I funds is not really appropriate. We've been through a challenge on that, and we've lost. We had a ruling, a preliminary ruling that was okay to direct the funds, then we had a second ruling that said, no, that was improper during the blueprint. So that the issue is whether or not that directing after the fact is different than the motion that we would pass to actually direct the superintendent to put the money in a certain formula, which is the purpose of this motion, is to direct the formula, not to direct the superintendent on how to use additional funds. That's not even within the subject of the issue that was on the agenda, in my opinion. It's up to that's up to our eminent counsel.
staff.
Yes, Attorney.
Okay. The staff will provide a report of Title I of what has happened this year and what's going to happen next year. Number 4,
That you can't do until you have a vote that distributes the money.
Number 4, there is a special report on the 40 to 60% schools on how they will get the operating funds they need to cover the cost to make a smooth transition and not lose any of their useful programs. So that is the motion that was put forth by Dr. Evans and seconded by Ms. Nakamura. And the floor is open for discussion now. Mr. DeBeck, any more comments?
Item 4, in my opinion, is also not possible because you can't report on how you're going to accomplish something that the motion didn't accomplish.
We ask for Mr. Brzee to comment.
Well, and if I could
Yes,
comment
Dr.
on
Evans.
the intent there was to stay with the status quo for this year as opposed to the 60%, and then to be evaluating on an ongoing basis what's happening in the 40 to 60% schools to later determine whether or not to fund those programs through Title I funds or find alternative funds, but to address that issue with more time rather than making a change at this time.
So you're suggesting an evaluation of the use of Title I funds as we eventually distribute them?
Yes, exactly, for future reference.
Yeah,
We
I'd,
would assume that's been done, but if it hasn't, that's part of what we should do.
Nakamura?
Yeah, I also am not comfortable with number 2, just giving the administration carte blanche. There's a significant amount of money coming in from the Obama stimulus package, and I agree with Mr. DeBeck that simply, handing this money over to the administration to do with as it please, otherwise we would not have to make any of these same decisions. I mean, the reason we're asked explicitly to take this vote every year is because it is within the prerogative of the Board of Education to do so, and I don't agree that.
Well, as a point of privilege here, or at least interpreting what we've got in front of us, the agenda today is asking us whether or not we approved a tier structure or not. Okay, so apparently we're reconsidering, but the issue on the agenda today is tiered or not. It is not any other kind of permutations of it, because that's not the way the agenda item reads.
It says clarification, the agenda item says clarification to the ratio of the superintendent on implementing the new Title I funding guidelines. And the purpose of this comment, this item today, was for us to clarify exactly what happened, what we were going to do after the last meeting. Ms. Nakamura's amendment was approved at the last meeting. We did not vote on the amended motion. But since we have been here today, we have voted to reconsider that amendment, but now we're voting on, since that has failed, we are now voting on Dr. Evans' original motion, which are those first 4 things.
Well, technically, in the choreography, we're supposed to vote on the amendment because
Right.
he asked for a reconsideration.
Exactly.
So we should vote on the amendment so that you can all vote it down officially.
Okay, so the amendment, which is for scenario 2 and items 2, 3, and 4 at the top of your sheet, are there any discussions? So the first vote that we're going to take is reconsideration for the amendment.
Wait a minute.
The amendment
Wait a
only
minute, wait a minute,
addresses
whoa, whoa.
item 1.
Okay, wait a minute. Mr. Brzee, it is my understanding that we did ask for a reconsideration of the amendment, okay? And then should that reconsideration of the amendment be dealt with before we go to this next item?
Yes. My understanding is the board decided that you'd already voted on the amendment, and then there was a motion to reconsider that. It passed.
3-2, yes.
So now now you need to vote
Now we need to reconsider.
on the amendment.
However, I want to, this is very complicated, we need to be clear about it. If we weren't clear before, we ought to be clear now. I believe that the motion that Catherine Nakamura made was a substitute motion, not an amendment, because it substantially changed the amount and distribution of the funds. Therefore, the items 1, the status quo, the tier, the direction, and all that was replaced by that motion. And a replacement motion is not carrying forward all the other provisions that were mentioned in the previous motion. It was not an amendment, it was a change in the actual substance of the motion. And so I consider it a substitute motion, and no matter what it was declared to be, I think it is substantially a change in the content of the motion. And that makes it a substitute motion, not an amendment.
Well, again,
So that, for example, so that right now, if we should say that we do not approve of the substitute motion, that's within our prerogative. but then we have still got the problem of whether or not the main motion is the motion.
Okay, the main motion is the motion, but the amendment was made as an amendment. That amendment has been up for consideration. That was approved. So now what's on the floor is reconsideration for the amendment that Ms. Nakamura made. Okay, so is there any discussion about that particular motion? You want to make it again, Ms. Nakamura?
It's to replace Dr. Evans' motion scenario 1, replace item number 1 in Dr. Evans' motion scenario 1 status quo tiered plan with scenario 2, which at that time was the staff recommendation.
Okay.
And I will talk to it.
Okay.
Since you don't have buttons, I
Okay.
guess it's okay.
Okay, thank you for
All right,
reminding me.
the argument was, and I think it was well presented by staff, that there were cases where the number of Title I students was large, but the percentage was low, and therefore the staff recommendation was made that the flat amount be given so that where there were substantial numbers of Title I kids, even though they were at some of these thresholds, that the net result would be better for children. The money would be following the children if we voted for the level, what I call level funding of Title I. The tiered system, which I've supported before this, was a traditional way of doing the weighting, and I got convinced by staff that the weighting was not as fair as the staff recommendation. So I will continue to support the amendment.
I have a question, I guess, for staff, because my understanding was that there are one or two cases where this happened, where there was a high number of students, but the percentage was lower, and so therefore those schools were actually losing out. But that scenario did not apply in the vast majority of the cases, and that it was weighted more heavily to the higher poverty schools.
Guess you'll have to
It's
hear from
32
staff what they
schools,
think.
and,
Right, so that's a question to Dr. Greer.
yeah, it's 32 schools, 14,545 kids
Yes.
Talking about, for what?
that would be affected by this,
By,
a loss of funds.
okay, you're not being clear. The question is...
Maybe you're not being clear.
Okay, I accept that.
I understand your question.
My question is not, I was afraid you're going to the 40 to 60 scenario, which I wasn't discussing, but that there are a couple of schools where it works in reverse and causes a disadvantage, but then in the majority of schools, that's not the case. So the question to staff is how many schools is that the case?
We'll have to, Chuck will spend some time while we're talking, looking at that. This is, ever since we met and we had this discussion and we weren't sure about it, the staff has been spending time going back trying to look at possibly how to, since you haven't decided and haven't voted, to try to look at this. And we have a proposal that we put together. You might not want to look at it, but if you do, I think that it would please the majority of you, because what we did is we took $1 million from our proposed stimulus package. We added it to the monies that we allocate out to the schools. We have that, and as you can see, the majority of the schools in the district are big winners, because we went from $412 per student to $425 per student in all schools that had 60% or above free and reduced lunch. From students that had schools that were from 40 to 60%, we decreased it a little bit from $126 to $100, trying to say, okay, we may start reducing this over time, but we're not going to do this all at one time. And you can see by adding those dollars, it was quite a big impact. Now, if you look at the yellow on there, the names of the schools where you see yellow, those were schools that either decreased in enrollment or the percentage of free and reduced lunch kids from last year to this year went down, so that any decrease in the amount of money has more to do with a decreased enrollment than it is in an allocation formula. I just wanted to point that out to you for whatever it's worth,
Thank you.
and I'll leave that alone.
Thank you. Let me come back to this, what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now is we're voting on Ms. Nakamura's motion. If there is no more comments related to Ms. Nakamura's motion, we have one speaker. Are you speaking about the motion, the amendment? Okay, please come forward, Ms. Valentina Hernandez.
Well, in order to consider the vote, we need to understand whether or not we all understand there is another option that's in front of us.
Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. I just want to try to get one thing off the table at a time right now.
Thank you, Board. My name is Valentina Hernandez, and I'm a parent and also a substitute teacher and an active member of DAC, District Advisory Council. And we have went over the different scenarios, and the one that's the fairest, I say, as well as other people from the DAC, is scenario 1, because it gives a higher amount to schools with the highest poverty need. For example, it'll give $447 to schools that are 99 to all the way
85.
to, let's see, to 85%, and then after that is $296 for schools that are a little bit less than that, all the way until 55%. In 56%, they start getting $196 per school, and it goes all the way up to 40%. So schools are not knocked off and left without any of the services that they need and have been using to help the students that are coming from other areas that are going to their schools, especially north of 8. So definitely, we need to keep the schools with the highest poverty rate getting the highest amount. And I'm not in favor of the one that says, give everybody the same amount, because that means you have one pie, you split it up equally among everybody, whether a person in 40% needs as much as a school in 99%. Because the school in 99% has higher needs because they have a higher number of language learners, a higher number of kids in poverty, et cetera, and a higher need because they also have lower performing schools, or they are in lower API. So please consider keeping the scenario 1. The scenario 2, although it might seem that it's very equitable, yes, they get $343, but that's cutting the pie from the schools that really need it the most. So please consider going back to scenario 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Barrera?
Yeah, I'm going to oppose Ms. Nakamura's amendment, scenario 2, and I'm going to support Dr. Evans' original motion, which is to stick with scenario 1. And the reason for that is, since we took the vote, the reason that I want to reconsider the amendment is since we took the vote, the superintendent has put some more time in with the staff, and I think, clarified that the staff's position is that scenario 2 is not ideal. It's become clear that the District Advisory Committee supports scenario 1. I've had a chance myself to spend some more time with Brenda Campbell and to dig into this. And the whole reason that I supported reconsidering moving from 60%, from 40% to 60%, was because I didn't want to cut the rug out from underneath schools abruptly. And scenario 2 does just the opposite. It cuts the rug out of schools in just the opposite direction. So I think we need to stick with status quo for the 09-10 year. I appreciate the work that Dr. Greer and the staff have done, which is to present a new alternative scenario. But I think that's something that we need to think about for the following year as we go through the process that Dr. Evans is recommending in the rest of his motion.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, I'm calling for the vote on the amendment which replaces scenario 1 with scenario 2 at this time. That fails 3-2. And now we would like to go back to the original motion. Dr. Evans made, which is scenario 1, status
I'd like to
quo.
offer another amendment, and that would be the removal of Section 2 of this motion, where the additional funds that will be used directed to the greatest need is determined by the administration. I agree with Mr. DeBeck. That is probably not legal, since that is why we take this vote every year. And I would like to know, how those funds are going to be used.
Okay.
Second it?
No,
Oh,
I have a comment and a motion.
well, is there a second? Is there a second for Mrs. Nakamura's amendment, first of all? Okay, seeing that there's no second, Mr. DeBeck?
I move that this motion only include the recommendation that the tiered practice of the past be followed, and none of the recommendations about staff directions or changes in the federal law. What will happen is, should the feds give us more money, then we'll have another decision about how we distribute it. We may want to distribute it according to this formula, or according to supplemented by the additional money, or we may want to consider other ways. But to limit that now or to just say it's a staff discretion doesn't make sense to me. So I think we should deal with the topic at hand, which is whether or not we use the tiered structure, which is a replication of the last few years of procedure. And so that I would want us
Second
to
that
just
motion.
amend the motion to include only the tiered structure.
It's been moved in second. Any comments about that?
Yeah, I would like to, and I don't know how much legal advice we can get on this issue at this point, because obviously my intent is not to pass any measure that does not, that is not legal. And maybe it was my misunderstanding that the additional federal funds did not necessarily need to be fit into the formula that we are using, that we are discussing today. Is that correct, Dr. Greer? Okay, and then what Mr. DeBeck has said, which makes me understand it maybe a little more clearly, is that since the additional federal funds don't necessarily need to be distributed in the same way as the original Title I funds, then it seems like the issue is whether it's the superintendent and administration that decide that, or it seems to me, if I understand right from Mr. DeBeck, whether the board would make that decision on additional funds, not redoing the whole thing, but saying, here's 10 million more, and now we're going to distribute it this way.
Yeah. Thank you. Our intent is, however you vote, we would bring back a proposal to you as a board on how we would recommend using those dollars. And in addition to that, it's my clear understanding that our parent advisory group needs to also meet and have some significant input into that as well. So if you voted to give the staff complete control over this, you do so if you want. That's not what we're asking for. And if you did that, we would still come back to you and say, we've met with our parent advisory group and our principals, and here is the proposal we have at hand. The kicker with all of this is, as we spent 45 minutes with a Council of Great City Schools conversation today, these are monies that have to be spent for 2 years. We have no more guarantee past 2 years. If we spend these monies, in my opinion, in a willy-nilly manner, as we have done with Title I dollars before, and we do not show significant increases in student performance or closing the gap, when these monies are up and we try to go back to Congress and say, would you let us keep these dollars or give us some more, I know the answer is going to be no. If particularly the urban districts can show some really focused improvement, I think we have a much better chance. So having said that, I see this as a team effort, and please know that neither I nor the staff are asking you to designate these funds for us to run off on our own trying to figure out how to spend.
Dr. Greer, I don't think you'd have a single person on this board or any other board that would publicly vote to spend money willy-nilly. So, it's a relief to know that you're not going to be spending it willy-nilly either.
Okay, so the amendment to the motion that Mr. DeBeck made was that we just approve item number 1, which just says for 09-10, use scenario 1, status quo, tiered plan, and that is all.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody?
That's the motion.
That is
Right.
that is the
No, that's the amendment.
amendment
That's the
that you
amendment.
made to your motion.
Amendment, and was that seconded?
You have to
It was
vote
seconded.
twice. Once for the amendment, once for the final.
Right. It was seconded. Any more
We're discussing that. I just lost my thoughts, but I'll explain my intent, and then we can decide what to do. My intent on that was basically because these funds were coming in for 2 years, that we not just do a regular block allocation according to these formulas to the schools, because these schools would get these extra money for 2 years and they would be gone, as opposed to doing something very special that would have a lasting effect, as opposed to just getting through these 2 years. And yes, then making a case for it being continued on, but otherwise we're just adding to a fund without a clear purpose. So that was, from what everything I'm hearing, both from Dr. Greer and also from Mr. DeBeck, is that, in a way, number 2 may be a moot point if it needs to come before the board anyway, and if it's clear that is a separate decision about those funds, and it does not have to follow the funds. That's what's most important to me. That doesn't have to follow the funds that we've set up right now according to the same formula. Correct. The additional funds are not don't have to be just plowed into the formula.
Not unless this board decides to do it that way.
Right, but it doesn't have to be.
That's your, no.
That by law, okay.
It doesn't have to be, nor by law do you have to keep the tiered structure you've used for the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, all of this is optional to you.
Okay.
The reason that the staff originally recommended going away from tiered formulas, again, is because I believe that this money ought to go to help the most needy kids. And so the proposal we put on the table for you today, we believe does that in a very phased-in, reasonable way. But it gets money into schools where you have, particularly high schools, where you have high pockets of poverty, and where you don't spend a little money here for this and a little money for that, but where you can do meaningful things. So,
Okay, the item,
Could I
Mr.
just
Dr.
finish? So that's the issue on point 2. On point 3, and this may come from being an uninformed new board member, but it was to make a point that we don't want to just push it off to another year and not do anything, but that we would begin studying this issue about how the money is being used. And I know it's determined by the advisory councils and so forth, and the plans for next year. And then the 4th point was basically to consider in the future the possibility of having a different threshold, but that if we were to consider that in advance, if anybody was left out of the formula, we would decide how to make that workable so that good programs did not disappear with just one vote. If we determined that the funds were too diluted in some areas and we're not accomplishing much, that's something that could come out of item number 4.
Okay, we're voting on Mr. DeBeck's amendment, which is that we only vote on using 0910 Scenario 1 Status Quo Tier Plan, and that is the extent of the motion.
So his
Okay,
amendment is
this
to remove 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, please vote. Okay, that passes 4-1. Okay, the amended motion now, make sure we all together here. We put on the amended motion now, and the amended motion is that we use 0910 Scenario 1 Status Quo Tier Plan minus 2, 3, and 4.
I'd like to speak to it.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, this motion, like other motions that we made, has no evaluation built into it, but I do concur with Mr. Evans that there should be evaluation of all district programs, and that one of the things that should have happened or should happen is when the next time we are facing a Title I decision, that the recommendations of staff would include a commentary or an evaluation of the effects of the previous behavior of this board. It's been troubling to me for a long time on the board that a lot of things are just come back to us without any explanation or evaluation of the program. I would hope that Dr. Evans and the rest of us would always ask, well, where's the research? Where's the stuff? Where do we, I've heard a lot of times people say things, well, this is research-based, and then it turns out no research has ever been done in San Diego on it. It was just somebody somewhere did an opinion research on it and said, oh, this is a good idea because I thought of it. I think we need to find research on it. So the motion that's before us does not preclude evaluation of the program at all. It shouldn't, and that was not the intent at all.
Kamara?
Yeah, my recommendation is that we actually ask for a report and operational expectations report under for what we've been doing specifically on Title I. I know that Dr. Greer is interested in doing that and in doing the entire evaluation, but I also would like, it's to comment that it's unfortunate that we received this recommendation with the orange on it. I don't know what we're calling this today, but the 2009, these recommendations 5 minutes before the board meeting. And it still needs to go through the DAC. It still needs to go through parent involvement. We need to hear from schools and figure out what is working and what's the way to do this. The only reason that I am so passionate about this is that, again, it's 14,545 kids in these 32 schools, and those aren't even counting all of the kids that are in schools that don't even meet 40%. It's far more kids than that that I think deserve some support through Title I. But I do think that we can. I don't think that's an impossibility, and I agree that, taking a look at it and figuring out how this money is spent is not only something that we can do, but it's an obligation to do it.
Dr. Evans?
I just want to reiterate back to my originally making the motion was my problem was that at the first vote, we were looking at numbers, percentages, this school gets this much, this school gets that much, without a clear picture of exactly what the money is doing. And, I've heard lots of stories since then from people in terms of what specifically the money is doing, and I've certainly learned a lot. But that, I agree with Mr. DeBeck that we need to have real reports and results so that we are not in a situation, and that's the reason I had put the additional things, which we're not discussing now, was so that we would not make this vote today and then at this time next year just be coming back to making the same vote without having a wealth of information about making a very good decision in a very orderly manner.
I'll speak now and get ready for the vote, but first of all, I want to thank the staff for their due diligence in trying to provide another solution. I don't believe that it will come to us the way it did this year. I think that they have placed someone in charge of this department that will get us the information that we need, that is knowledgeable, and that will ensure that as this comes forward again, that it is reviewed and each scenario has a valid reason for even being presented, and that DAC input is included. Having said that, please vote.
This is voting on my motion.
Yes.
Okay.
Your amended motion.
Yes, as amended.
Okay. That passes 5-0. Thank you very much for your time. Superintendent, we'd like to get to the main reason that we're here this evening, and that is to talk about our budget. My understanding this afternoon was we still did not have a state budget, and so we will continue working.
Not unless they voted in the last 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, President Jackson. Our staff has worked all weekend. We worked long days and hard nights, and I can tell you we know more about our budget than I think anyone has ever known about our budget, and we continue to overturn every single budget category. We are going to be a much more efficient, a much better run organization than we have been in the past. I can promise you we are discovering all kinds of things that, quite frankly, have just been done the same way for a long time. I think
and the word is a lean, mean educational machine.
Fighting educational machine. Yeah, we've got to put that word in there since you're Navy. What we have in front of you today, and James and I are going to spend some time and President Jackson, if we could, we would like to make our presentation without any questions. We would like to go through it and get through it, and then come back and answer any questions that board members might have.
So it's duct tape time?
Duct tape and...
I know it's going to be hard because I promise you I'm guilty as well, as you very well know, probably more so than others. But we would like to be able to try to do this. If you look up at the very top of the page that you see, and it's up on the screen, we have projected this coming year a $63,100,000 deficit. Now, this follows on the heels of our cutting $53 million out of this budget before the beginning of this school year, and just last week you're approving reducing another $33 million of mid-year budget cuts. So I'm going to ask James Macias, our Chief Finance Officer, to tell you what is included in that projected deficit. James.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here at the workshop today. So what we've done over the past several days is essentially consolidate all the information that we have best available to us. And as Dr. Greer had pointed out, literally yesterday, late last night, we got updated information from Monica, the person that works with us up in Sacramento. It was changing that fluid, so it's very fluid for us. So when we look at the total issues that I think that we have here, we really have to solve for the $63.1 million deficit. Part of the components of part of that would be a large portion is about $35 million worth of additional cost increases. Those cost increases are things that we don't necessarily control. So, for example, utility increases, fuel increases, healthcare cost increases, step and column increases, those kinds of things. So when you look over how large the deficit is, a big portion of that is literally just additional cost increases based on what's taking place in the economy.
And a part of it, again, is a 1.5% salary increase because of a year of experience that teachers on our salary schedule go up, and that's just part of it, and that's every school district that I think in the county has that as a cost, so that's not unique to San Diego Unified.
That's correct. The other thing that we've included in here is the school site formula allocation. So you see that number being 14.2 million. That total combination is about $77.3 million. What you have in front of you essentially is kind of it's a presentation that shows areas where we think we can find savings both on the revenue standpoint and also on the expense side.
And the $14.2 million, as we've explained to the board before, this is the amount of money it would take to adequately staff our schools. And I know some board members have said that, well, is this the time to address this? And the question is, it's a whole, and if you don't address this as a board right now by finding cuts in other places to fill this, what you're basically doing is you're handing this problem off to your principals and saying, you've got to find the money from your supplies, materials, equipment, from your classified positions. You've got to find this money to staff these positions. So that's, I think, very important that you understand that as a board. Either you find the cuts somewhere else in the organization, or you're passing that $14.2 million problem off to our principals, and you're saying to them, you find those cuts, because either way, that hole is there. If you'll flip over to page 2, you can see up at the top of that page in pink that $63 million plus right under that the $14.2 million for total school funding, and for a total of $77 million. Under Section A, potential new revenues, you have seen this before. Under the green, we believe that we can expand or extend our high school lunch program and generate about $1 million in savings. We believe we can expand the breakfast program and generate about, in our elementary schools, and generate an additional $1.2 million in savings, and serve meals on our minimum release days and save about $750,000 there. We believe that if we increase attendance by 0.5 percentage point, that'll generate $3 million for a total of approximately $6 million in new revenues. Then if you can see the blue group, we followed the board's direction and we tried to present you with potential savings that would perhaps not impact personnel. Now, the very first one of those items, central office reorganization, $2 million. Quite frankly, that does have some personnel in it. We think we could handle that through attrition. And the CERT program, it was hard to separate it out because a good piece of this was not filling vacant positions that we currently have. And we wouldn't know which of those positions are going to be there until Mr. Macias, Mr. Wong, and Mr. Lagasse finish reorganizing their offices. Number 2, you can see is CERP savings. And the CERP savings for early retirement for our Teachers Association range between $7.6 million to $12.3 million. We landed on 8.3 because that was kind of a middle-of-the-road number for us. If we have 633 teachers retire and we fill those positions at the 85th percentile level, that would generate $12.3 million in savings. If you have fewer than that, that would bring that number back down. So you can see that's our best estimate. If you were to have 800 teachers retire, that would generate more savings. The next one you can see is all other bargaining units between 7 and 4.7. You can see us filling those positions at a 90% level. Quite frankly, I believe that we would be filling those positions more at a 95% level. We reduced about 500 clerical classified positions last year. There's just not a lot of wiggle room to keep laying people off unless we really start getting into really decimating the services, support services, and I'm just not sure we can do that. Under transportation, you can see we have about $200,000 under a charter school alternative approach to transportation. Again, implementing a different bell schedule in our schools. We know the complaints you'll get for doing that. We understand that. You heard them before. This is a $1.2 million in savings. Eliminate contributions to pupil bus replacement fund. That's $1 million. I know that's not popular with some board members. Quite frankly, our bus fleet is about 1.5 to 2 years older than the average of the Council of Great City Schools. Skipping that for a year, we believe is a reasonable approach. We don't think it's going to create an unsafe condition for our students. If you look on the next page, which is page 3, you've heard some discussion about this, but quite frankly, this is something that I would like to encourage the board to approve now or sooner than later, because to generate any savings, we have to have it built by July 1. And so if we keep talking about it and don't build it, there's not going to be any savings. But we think between $300,000 and $500,000 a year in savings is something we can accumulate. Next is shift cost of custodians to the redevelopment fund, about $6.3 million. Open enrollment for H&W benefits, about a $1.2 million savings. Developer fees, 3% administrative cost, about $150,000. The additional federal IDEA funding to reduce contributions to special education, we can recover $6.8 million a year, or 50% of the money each year, the new money that would be going into special education. Now, there's a kicker to that I'll explain to you at a later time. We just can't claim those savings. We have to identify other $6.8 million of expenditures that we have expended in either Title II, Title IV-B, Title V, Title IX, other title dollars. And it's just frankly, it's a paper exercise, but you would have to verify and certify that these were cuts we would have made, but these are cuts that we would backfill. We can still generate that savings. The next is categorical flexibility. The state has given us the flexibility of using ending balances from this school year of about $2.3 million that we could offset our shortfall. And the next one, item 10B, is the use of Tier 3 categorical funds. That's $3 million. Now, what the state did, and I think we need to take just a quick second, and James and I'll go over this carefully to try to explain it. The first thing they did in categorical funding is they reduced all categorical fundings to districts by 15% for next year. Now, that took a great deal of flexibility away from us in and of itself. When you reduce T dollars, you reduce textbook dollars, you reduce all categorical funding by 15%. The 43 categories that they gave us flexibility in, we will get you a copy of that and share that with you. You look at that, and that's not, quite frankly, the kind of categories that you would want to reduce. I mean, a lot of this is things like large print for children that are visually impaired. A lot of this, one of the categories I saw was where pregnant teenage children, it's a program for them where they can get milk subsidies for their children. Well, can you imagine where you're going to recommend that you reduce that? As you go through this, we didn't have a lot of options, but we felt like we can reduce $3 million from there. Number 10C is the use of instructional materials. That's $6.9 million. I want to point out to you that's textbook dollars. We received $16 million a year in textbooks. If you reduce that by 15%, then all of a sudden you have $13.6 million. Well, 60% of those dollars come from lottery funds, which they did not give us flexibility in. So you can't take all $16 million in textbook bucks if you wanted to. That's $6.9 billion. If you take that to offset your shortfall, it could be another 7 years before you order new math books. And again, we get those dollars. We have elementary, middle, and high school adoption. So if you decided to take those dollars for textbooks, we would have to come back and decide or recommend to you which area do we not adopt. Is it the elementary, middle, or the high school? And the other piece of this is one-time money. Because if you take this year and you don't find the $6.9 million in cut next year, you will be foregoing another adoption of textbooks, and it may be science textbooks or social studies, etc. Just wanted you to know that. The $1.3 million in item number 13 is $1.3 million, which is a reduction in special education that does not include personnel. That in and of itself are the options that we think you could choose. And if you were to choose those options, that would generate $45 million in savings, approximately. That still would leave you approximately $26
million. It's on your cover page.
First page. That would leave you $26 million that you would still have to find to balance next year's budget, and that's at the level that we currently are today without the state having a new budget. The longer the state goes without adopting a new budget, we all know that this number is going to go up. You can remember back when this number was lower than $63 million. You can remember when it was projected, I believe, to be $55 million or $56 million. And it continues to go up because of compound interest as long as we continue to wait.
Dr. Greer, I think I want to bring you back to this, the scrub we've done for 0809. We literally have carved out another $33.2 million out of this fiscal year period. So when you look at the total reduction that we've taken, it's a significant amount of dollars. Thank you.
So the point we're making is, we said earlier, 53 at the beginning of the year, 33 at the middle of the year. That's $88 million before we turned around and identified this $45 million that could be possible cuts that doesn't, by and large, doesn't have a huge impact on personnel costs or on areas that we think that you would have to negotiate. At the end of the day, if you take that $26 million, the remaining deficit, even if you push that $14 million off to the principals and said, you solve this for a year, we're not going to make these cuts, you take it out of supply, material, and equipment dollars, you take it out of classified staff, you can see you'd still have a $12 million shortfall. So you come over to the red categories on page number 4. Basically, these are options. Most of these would have to be negotiable with our different unions. The first one is the district pays for a basic Kaiser premium, which is a certain level of health insurance for our employees, and if they want an option above that, they would pay for it out of their pocket, and that would generate about a $5.6 million in savings. Increase the copay from $5 to $10 is a $1.5 million savings. we would have to have this calculated. I don't think it's fair to make the assumption that if you went from 5 to 15, it would be $3 million. Might be more. We're going to ask our folks to look at that for us. Number 3, double benefits when both spouses are employed. If we didn't have that, and you can read the explanation, it would save about $300,000. We've had some talk about the OSAL program. I thought it would be fair to break this out into different areas so that you could see if you decided that we were not going to have the Balboa Park program, that would save about $1.6 million. Old Town is $1.6. Palomar is $3.4, and the reason Palomar is so much more is we spend about $2 million a year in renting that facility from the county. Class size increases in kindergarten. If we were to increase class size from 20 students to 21, just one student, it would save approximately $2 million. If you increased it by 2 students, it would save approximately $4 million. Same thing for first grade, second grade, third grade. You can see the numbers, but anywhere from $2 million per student in kindergarten and first grade to about 1.8 million in second grade and third grade. Increasing class size by 1 student in grades 6 through 8, about a $1.9 million savings. Increased class size in grades 9 through 12 by 1 student, about $3.3 million. I'll just insert this right now. I think our class sizes in our high schools and middle schools are as high as I would want to see them go, unless we just got in tremendous, it's not that we're not in tremendous financial strait, but it would have to get worse than it is for me to recommend to you that you would increase that. Eliminate the 9th grade class size reduction where we lowered class size to 20-to-1 in high school 9th grade English classes. That would save about $3.9 million. Eliminate our K-2 class size in our elementary schools would save about $8.8 million. Reduce visiting teacher pay by 1%. Quite frankly, not enough to even consider, but I thought you would want to see it. $80,000. Close small schools. If you close each small schools you close, $450,000. If you close 10, you can see that's $4.5 million. If you close 20, that would be $9 million. One principal assigned for every 2 small elementary schools with enrollment of 350 or fewer students. That's 24 schools. That would save you $1.6 million. Quite frankly, if you ask me about that in terms of a recommendation, I think that it's more difficult to supervise two small schools of 350 than it would be 2 schools that would have 200 or fewer. And I also would tell you that it depends about it has to do with the geographical location of being able to get from one school to the next. I believe that $1.6 million, while it's what you ask us to put in there, I think that number would be probably $800,000 would be more realistic, or even $500,000 in terms of operationalizing this particular criterion number. Number 16, counseling staff levels. If we were to raise our counseling ratio of 1 counselor per X number of students, if we added 5 students to that would save us $2.3 million. That means our counselors, for example, versus having, I'm just tossing out a ballpark number, don't hold me to this, but for example, versus having 400 students per counselor, we would have 405 students per counselor. You could save that, so you can see that's a big savings. Decreasing the nursing allocation. If you reduce the nursing allocation for every 50 students in the district, that'd save us about $270,000. Custodials, if we eliminated 10 custodial positions, it would save $500,000. Same thing for landscaping, about $550,000. 1% salary rollback is $8.9 million. a district-wide week-long furlough, which some people, Mr. DeBeck and others have mentioned, would be $6.6 million. If you could do that, you would have to negotiate it, and you would have to find out legally whether or not you have the authority to shorten the school day, which in California is required by state to be 180 days, and you would have to decide whether or not you could have the legal authority to decrease it to 175. That would be a question for Mark and others. If you looked at how we fund the GATE program, if we funded it at the regular teacher ratio versus we are currently funding it at 23-1, if we used the regular teacher ratio, you would save $2 million. If you eliminated JROTC, you would save $2.7 million. If we did not have the VAPA program, you would save $3.2 million. If we did not have athletics for freshmen, we would save $140,000. If we had no athletics in grades 9 through 12, and this is primarily paying coaches their supplements, and that would eliminate $3.2 million. And if we had no magnet schools in the district, that would generate about $8.9 million for a total of about $81 million for you to look at in terms of trying to find a possible $26 million in savings. Now, we are continuing to look for money on the operational side of the house. We believe that there are significant savings there. The problem is that those funds are restricted, and we cannot get state authorization to use dollars that have gone for maintenance, have gone for operations to help offset this. We are right now in the process of reorganizing how we schedule buses. We are looking at very carefully doing a cost-benefit analysis of all the contracts we have in the district. And we're looking particularly at our Student First contract, where we transport special education students. It's come to my attention, we have buses that only transport 2 students. Another bus will transport 8. And we're looking at every one of those, and we're scrubbing those as cleaner than they've ever been scrubbed. And we're going to come back as a staff and determine whether or not this is worthwhile. But even if it were not, and we could save X number of millions of dollars, it may be that those dollars are restricted dollars and it doesn't help us over here. So this is a bit of where we find ourselves. It's not a pretty position to be in. The real issue here for us is do we think that you can get at this kind of money without issuing pink slips, because March the 15th is coming up? That's a question you've asked us. And we've talked about it as a staff. We think if you have enough participation in the early retirement CERT program, that yes, you can. If you don't, it's very questionable. And I know that some of you have made a commitment not to issue pink slips. I don't like pink slips. I've gotten them when I was a teacher. And I promise you, no one likes to receive pink slips. But we are in a very precarious situation as a district. And if we have a high enough participation in the CERP, we think that we can get there from here. If you don't have, I think that's a whole different question that we would have to tackle together. James, what have I left out?
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, it is, right now we're projecting it to be $26 million, but when I talked to the California Department of Finance, the budget officer for education, based on the fact that the Sacramento group has not made any impacts or changes to the budget just yet, they're still kind of debating what they're going to do there. She thinks that the revenue problems that we're experiencing at the state side, meaning sales tax, capital gains tax, corporate tax, those kind of things, could be even less than they projected during the last time. So my concern really is, we think we have a $63 million plus the 14 deficit. It could be higher just based on the fact that the economy continues to go downward, and they're not being very cooperative with us at the Sacramento side to help us manage this at the local level.
So I would like to say thank you to James, his staff, and for our whole team. It's been sometimes like pulling wisdom teeth with dull screwdrivers to get at some of this. It's been painful, but it's been very helpful and beneficial, and I think we all feel a lot better about the district. I think think we feel a lot better about each other in terms of having a new transparency. And I'd like to say thank you to board members for insisting that this is the way that we go back and take a hard look at what we're doing. And so, having said that, I can promise you there is not many other places to look. When you cut $53 million at the beginning of the year, $33 million out at mid-year, and you do that without impacting personnel, and personnel in our district's 85 to 88% of your budget, I think our staff, I certainly want to commend them. I know you do too, for their hard work. We're continuing to look. We're not going to ignore $200,000 worth of savings here or $100,000 there. And if bigger savings comes down the road as we look at contracts, we'll be bringing them back to you. We're as dedicated to reducing this number as you are. I share James' concern. I think it would be irresponsible for me as superintendent not to tell you that. I worry that this gap is going to continue to broaden, and I want to say to you, this is not a one-time problem. I believe this is a multi-year problem. I don't think the housing market in this state or anywhere else has bottomed out. I think that we're going to continue to look at this. I know that some of our bargaining groups have asked that we give them any savings above a certain amount of teachers who retire as a one-time bonus or adding it to the salary schedule. Frankly, as much as I'd like to see our people paid more and paid better, it frightens me to take a hard look at that given what we are facing right now, because I think at the end of the day when this is over, it would not surprise me again for next year that they talk about mid-year budget cuts again, and it would not at all surprise me at the end of the year we would be starting the next year trying to figure this out. I think that whether we do it this year or whether we do it in the future, I've said this to you before, it's unpopular as it is, we're going to have to consider what we do with some of our small schools. We either have to look at redistricting to bring more kids in, we have to look at some way to address that as an issue long term. So with that, President Jackson, we'd be glad to entertain any questions or comments. I know this is bleak news, but we would be glad to try to answer your questions.
Terry Massa, can I just talk a little bit about cash just for a couple seconds? Is that okay, Madam President? I just want to make sure, the other thing that's a conundrum for us here at the district is the fact that based on the problems that Sacramento is having and the fact that they are out of cash, that really puts a constraint on what's happening for us. And so right now, on a monthly basis, we have about $69 million worth of essentially payroll costs that we put out to pay all of our employees. What's happened is they've taken away apportionments for us in February and April, and they propose that they're going to pay us back essentially July of the new fiscal year. Based on that cash flow forecast, that's about $21.1 million that will be short. And what we'll have to do is we'll have to borrow approximately $25 million toward the end of the year from our state school facilities fund to essentially make sure we're just meeting our cash needs, right? And so since they haven't done anything in Sacramento to fix the budget problem and the cash problem, I'm concerned that not only do we have constraints on our general fund unrestricted, as you can see from the data, but they're also starting to put constraints on some of the capital dollars that we have here. And as a normal operating practice, you don't want to borrow against your capital funds to meet your operating cash flow needs. That's just a necessity based on what's happening in the economy. So part of what is worrisome for me as the finance officer is that they're hitting us from every area. It isn't just a budget problem anymore, it's really a cash flow problem. And that's very complicated because, cash is the lifeblood of the organization. And $25 million is a lot of money that you have to borrow. So right now we have about $190 million in our state school facilities that's uncommitted. That means I have to borrow against that. Keep in mind, though, we've got, based on our Prop S work, and the fact that more than likely we'll only be able to have a first issue for our GO of about $150 million. The project plan was really built on about a $200 million spend. So there's a gap there already. So what that will do is that'll push out that work, essentially. So my point to make is that it's a budget problem, but now that it's a cash problem, that's even more worrisome for us because you run out of cash, you can't pay your bills. And so the only access that I really have to make sure I meet those cash needs is pretty much in our state school facilities fund.
The last thing, Madam President, is that as our staff's work in terms of scrubbing this budget, is about finished. We're going to continue to look, but as I wanted to again stress to the board, there's not a lot of other places to look. And we're getting to the point now where, as painful as some of these decisions are going to have to be, they're decisions that are going to have to be made because we will have to negotiate with our different bargaining units some of these cuts, and our negotiating team would have to get started with this at some point in time. So I just wanted to share that with you as well.
Okay, Mr. DeBeck, please.
Sure. I move the board approve the reductions in the blue group.
I think we already have, didn't we?
No, we didn't.
We didn't still? Okay.
We didn't.
That's the total, is the first two pages is 4529.
I second the motion.
Okay, just open for discussion that we approve the items in the blue group. Mr. Barrera?
Can I just ask, number 13, $1.3 million reductions in special education program, what is that?
We got that information this morning. If I could probably ask Gammy to see if she's got the collection, because this is real-time information that you're getting. And so as soon as we get it, we're providing it to you. So I'm not sure if Gammy has had a chance to work with their budget analyst to identify the total 1.3. Gammy, can you comment on that? So what we've done from a process standpoint is we literally have met with every department head and division head, and we're walking through their entire financial plan. And based on when we met with Arun, we think we found about the 1.3. Do you have any line items for us?
I do have the line items, but I don't have it with me. I can tell you that there will be no personnel impacted by the reduction. They're mostly supplies, personnel development, travel, items like that.
Consultants.
I could provide it to you. I have it upstairs.
Do you have it upstairs?
Yes.
Do you want us to go grab that real quick or not?
Yes, I think that, and certainly as the board members speak, I think that to do this, we really need to have, I would say, full disclosure as to what it is. I know you have some, impact statements written here, but I think there may be some other things that may make a person, choose, to modify something for various reasons.
If you go get that, Gammy, that'll be helpful. And just as a reminder for board members, and you already know this, but we're also infusing special education next year with about $6.9 million new dollars as well.
Since we're on that point, I'd like to, since we're asking them for information, I guess what I would specifically be looking for was that last year we inadvertently cut out the professional development that was necessary under the HARE report as we mainstreamed those students. That really, knocked the feet out from under that whole program, and I would be
Just as a quick reminder, you did, but we reinstated $4 million to allow him not only to, when we did that last year, it wasn't just a staff development. Remember, we told you we were afraid that we had cut too deep in the personnel, and we reinstated $4 million, which would allow him to hire additional staff back to meet IEP requirements. And the other piece is that he then had the money to do the staff development he wants. So he was held harmless there.
Well, that's not, when I was grilling him the other day mercilessly on this, he said that we cut his professional development, and that's why it didn't take place for these students. I guess my point here, moving forward, is I want to make sure that we have professional development for this. To me, sending students into the mainstream classrooms without professional development for the teacher and anyone else who is involved is cruel to it's tantamount to just plain cruel.
That's very, very fair. Here's another piece that we asked Council of Great City Schools today, is if we're getting $6.9 million a year for 2 years to go into special education, and we're being told it's only for 2 years, and we spend that money on IEP requirements, and then all of a sudden the money goes away, but the IEP requirements, as you know, never do. So what does that do to us?
I'd like to speak to this motion. On every single item here, we could ask for line item information. The facts are that staff has made estimates that we are going to accept. There may be some For example, there may be a number like cost of custodians to redevelopment may or may not be that exact amount. The supercomposite structure may change slightly, but you know what? If we're going to go down to the level of line items, then we basically are pretty much crippled, because we're going to have to, if we need to look at exactly what every one of these $1.3 million is in special ed. I think you're going to be spending many, many hours trying to figure out stuff that you don't really need to bother with. You got somebody in charge of the program. They say they think they can come up with $1.3 million. So let's say they come up with $1.25 million. Who's going to argue over it? See, I don't really think, when you look at this total picture of the deficit we're in, this blue savings is $45 million. So that's just, what, a piece. It's only a piece of it. So let's say you micromanage out $250,000 of it, so what? You're still not, it's just not worth talking about.
Well,
We got many other things on our plate besides whether or not Arun's missed the count a bit.
I think that, and I want to speak for just a second, I don't want to micromanage, but there are some things on this particular area that raises concerns with me, and that is items 3A and 3B. The item 3A, if I understand it correctly, that means in the areas where we only have charter schools that we just opened up, traditional schools, that there's no longer transportation. One of the reasons that those parents asked for transportation was mostly a safety reason, because some of those schools are around gangs, and some of those children that are coming to those schools don't want to walk home in gang areas. So what we're now saying is that we don't have a public school for you in that area. We only have a charter school, and the public school that we have for you, we will not provide you safe passage to go there. And if that is the case, then I cannot support that. In item item 3B, the bail change. Now, last year you tried the bail change, and there was a huge pushback. And so I think this next one over here, sheet that you have, identifies the schools that you're looking at. And so part of the problem is we know as board members we have some hard decisions to make, but I think it's also very prudent for us to make sure that we're looking at communities and how they're going to be impacted by this. And I look at Alcott, Bayview Terrace, Encanto, Erickson, Gage, Hawthorne, Hearst, and Marvin. And what I don't know, okay?
When they start.
Right, I don't know when they start. I don't know how much busing is entailed with those, and certainly the 110 minutes later for CPMA, does that destroy their program altogether? I mean, so there are some items in here that I think we have to discuss. It says that the meeting for the CIOs take place February, but have those actually taken place? And this, so as I look in here deeper, I see that the schools Roosevelt, Bell, and Mann are the ones that we're getting bus services cut to. And again, I am concerned because those schools are in neighborhoods that have multiple gangs surrounding them. The children that may have to walk long distances because they do not have a public middle school nearby are being forced to either go to a charter school and or get on a bus and go someplace else. So we will bus them out of their community, but not within their community. So I do have a concern with that. And here you do have it. The students that are affected are Baker, Balboa, Burbank, Kimbrough, Rodriguez, Choya, Smith, Chavez, Emerson, Bandini. And I don't want to think that the staff is looking for areas where they would get the least amount of parent pushback. I think that, yes, we have to make cuts, but they have to be fair and equitable across the entire district.
Well, the other
I think the real
communities don't get
issue,
busing.
I think the real issue is here that a lot of the district doesn't get busing unless it is busing as part of the Carling case, or because it is our VEEP busing. We just don't provide it. And so we're looking at, we try to take all these things into consideration. But again, we're not, these are hard decisions. There's none of them that are easy. And so if we don't eliminate these, then where? And that's the only question. And we again were trying to look at every option, and we were not trying to target anywhere where we don't get pushback from folks. It's just that the transportation, that we provide is a limited transportation.
Question here? On the bell time issue, I don't need to know all the details, but it says 30 minutes earlier or less for these 8 schools. Could you tell me what would be the earliest that an elementary in this list is starting?
Yeah, Bill, I would assume you or someone here, I see Alex is here, she could come, and Bill and Alex could come and talk with you. As you know, one of the real concepts behind starting or stopping schools earlier or later is where your savings lie is where you can take a bus.
Sure.
And if my school starts at one time and your school starts at enough later, that one bus can pick my kids up, drop them off, then they can go get your kids and drop your kids off. And by using one bus and one driver, it saves you by buying a bus, and it saves you some additional salary. That's where this comes from.
Right. It's just that 9 o'clock to 8:30 would probably be a good thing, and someone else might object to 8 to 7:30.
And if I could add just one thing on it, for the kids that are getting on buses to come to this school starts maybe, you're taking it back 30 minutes, that means 30 minutes, we're going to have kids on buses at 5:30 instead of 6.
It also could mean, just to be frank with you, to answer your question, I'll let them present it, but you can go the other direction, is that if you have a bus that starts at one time and you're going to get on it 30 minutes later, mom or dad may have gone to work. So you may either be staying in the house by yourself, unattended, or you may be standing out by the road, because some parents will lock their home because they're afraid their kids won't, or they'll forget. So I want to be clear that it is an either-or side of the coin, but it does generate this kind of savings, and I thought that it was worthy of your consideration. So Alex, Bill, do you have the answers to our questions?
Yes, we do, Superintendent. I'm going to turn it over for some specific bell times for Alex, but I wanted to comment on a couple additional remarks. Last year, we started out trying to adjust over 50 schools, and we were over a 30-minute margin, and due to concerns about daycare, scheduling, coordination of a variety of programs, athletic fields, we went back around. We used the 30-minute rule. That means we wouldn't adjust the day 30 minutes early or late at the front end, back end. Came back and identified 46 schools and had savings. And that was across the district as we could coordinate to get that savings. This year, these are, after scrub and after multiple scrubs, these are the last schools, with the exception of Croc CPMA, that are inside that 30-minute window. And it wasn't geographic specific. This was all that was left without going beyond that 30-minute window. So I just wanted to make that clear to all of you. We had planned to discuss this with the chief improvement officers back in early February, but scheduling and other issues came up, so we are actually talking to them on Monday, but we have given them a heads up of what we've been focused on, where we have been trying to find the savings for synchronizing buses. That's shortening routes, making the buses fuller, and trying to accommodate that 30-minute window. It's many moving pieces. It's not easy work because of the system we have today, which is being replaced over the summer. Now, let me turn it over to Alex, who has that issue of times, so that you can be aware of that.
Good evening. A couple of things. For the 8 schools listed that were, and I didn't know that you were getting the PowerPoint sheets as well, or I would have given you the times with those. But for the 8 schools, the 8 elementaries plus Alba, Alcott is only 15 minutes earlier, and I have the times back at my chair, but none of them go more than 30 minutes. Those are all earlier times, the earliest being 7:30 start time. For CPMA, it's actually 100 and, didn't see it off the top of my head, I'm sorry. 110 minutes. Later for CPMA. CPMA has been very gracious in adjusting their bell times over the past 3 years, but they have a lot of buses. They have 26 buses at CPMA, and by changing their time to a later time, not starting until 8:55, I believe, we could save $1 million just with CPMA without even adding the other 8 schools. The other thing, just to mention real briefly, and I know because it's on the PowerPoint, and I know that Ms. Jackson, you mentioned it, for the charter alternative, the only program that would not get charter alternative next year is Roosevelt, because now there is Memorial in the area. Bell and Mann still would be able to feed because of Keeler and because of O'Farrell, because there wasn't a middle school in the area.
Right.
Roosevelt is the only one that now does have a middle school in the area. That's why for those schools, those students, they wouldn't receive the busing. However, they qualify for magnet. They're actually eligible magnet under Roosevelt, and some of them very well could still get transportation in that fashion.
Okay, thank you. Other board member questions?
Very helpful. Call for the question.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt everything that's in the blue group. Discussion, please vote. It passes 5-0. Yes.
I've got something else if you need it.
Does anyone have a plan for how to attack the pink group?
Okay, Mr. Ubeck was getting ready to comment.
Sorry.
Well, that's okay. I have another proposal. I'm going to pass this out. I, again, dream in my head over issues for the district, and I know you didn't like my furlough plan. Pass one each. So a couple of nights ago, I don't remember when, I came up with ideas to price out. And here, I'll explain it to you. You may want to write on this piece of paper, but this is what this paper is supposed to represent. I got staff to make this paper. Okay, what my idea was, there's 180 days required by state law for no penalties for attendance for kids. Okay, that's a given. And that I don't want to reduce that at all. Okay, that was a given. You know, I think we could have saved a lot of money the other way, but this is a concession to that. And then the other rule is that you don't have to have all your staff on duty when the schools are open. You only need to have the teachers there, okay? So there are savings that could be had when you had principals, counselors, other staff, custodians, all different people working, I'll call it alternate shifts. So then the alternate day work schedule for non-teaching that I'm proposing in this proposal would be, and this includes central office and the superintendent, includes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 1 week, and Tuesday and Thursday for the following week. It's a two-week schedule. So at a given school, there would be a vice principal or somebody keeping the school open, even though the principal may not be there that given day. That's just the idea. Just follow along the idea. I'm sure there'll be some concerns. So then we also have this year, which we have more than 180 teaching days. So the other thing that I asked about was, what about if we furlough teachers for the 2 days this year? So that's in this recommendation, okay? And then the other was, if you did this kind of plan that I described, if you did it in 2010, 9 and 10, which is next year, how much would it save? Well, the piece of paper in front of you shows that if you did what I propose, which is shorten the school year only to the legal maximum, minimum, which is 180, that in the year 2008, 9 and 10, you'd save $15 million. This is not on the blue sheet at all, okay? In addition, you would save, if you did this for this year, for the coming month sometime, you would save approximately, and I had an estimate, I'm amazed at sometimes how close I am, of around $8 to $10 million. Okay, so that it's possible, if we implemented this as soon as we could, that this proposal would generate somewhere in the range of $20 to $30 million.
You know, Mr. DeBeck, you shared that piece of paper, the prose that you have written as opposed to the numbers, and I suppose there's a chance of us getting a copy of that.
Well, sure, I don't mind, I'll just pass it along, you can all read. It's a very short, simple thing, but what I'm basically saying is, furlough those people that you can furlough without getting any penalty and keep the schools open, okay? Do it over a 2-week period. You decide, that's the management's job to figure out when. And then, if possible, only have 2 days of instruction cut off at the end of the year. Okay? Now, they could be mixed and matched. I mean, I'm not going to get into how to run the school district. The idea is, how much would you save if you did this? Well, if you did this for the 2-year period, as much as you could do this year, which would be a 2-day furlough of teachers, also a 2-week, which is only really 1 week of furlough for non-teaching personnel, that this year you'd save in the vicinity of $10 million, and in the coming year, if you did it, you know, if you committed to it, you'd save another good $20 million. So that the value of this is no layoffs, programs remain intact, and if you look on the blue sheet, which has it in its, the pink sheet, which has as a cumulative total, think of 81 million. This is leaves you 50 million. You still got a lot to go. But at least it's no layoffs, and all these other ones include, I'm going to tell you that if you look down the pink list, you've got in excess of 250 people laid off, which this proposal will get at least half of those. So that's a part of what I'm bringing forward. It's only for your consideration, and it wasn't one of the things that staff thought of, but it's from what I've done for my people that give me consultation about the law, I was wrong about the first place because we'd have to muscle our way to get some of the stuff done, and it would require either special legislation or standing up to the state. We still could have saved it. I didn't make a mistake on the amount. Now I'm not making a mistake on the amount again, but I'm proposing something that's a little bit less disastrous. It's still disastrous. So is $80 million, by the way. But at least this is a step toward that's not on your blue sheet or on your pink sheet. So I'm just bringing it forward for now. One of the things you might do is you might say, okay, let's verify all this. Okay, this is what staff told me, but you know, you need to if you think there's some merit to it, you need to get a little more out of it than just my say so. And maybe you'll need to get Mr. Pickering to sharpen his pencil again, or the folks upstairs to get the facts all straight. But everything I've said could happen in the coming months.
Okay, Dr. Evans and then James.
Yeah, my question is, I guess this is to staff or attorney in terms of having a certain number of days that the teachers are hired per year and then the classified staff also being on contract. How does this district imposing furloughs interact with this whole collective bargaining agreements?
Exactly what you do. You negotiate it.
You would certainly have to negotiate all of that.
You do layoffs.
And what would happen is if you had anyone who, any union that did not agree with that, Mark could fill you in as our attorney about what our next positions would be in terms of trying to impose furloughs or any of these items that you have here. And you probably would end up in arbitration and a big battle over it. But
okay, so the first point was to enter into negotiations if that's something they were willing to do,
right,
as opposed to being imposed. Okay,
exactly.
But even so, the second list, the pink list, it's got a whole lot of negotiations in it, folks.
Everything on the pink list has got negotiations.
So you know, you negotiate one thing or another. At least this is a big chunk of money all at once.
Oh, okay, so for the purpose of today's meeting, and now that we're to the pink area, I'm going to ask. I'm sorry, James.
Yeah, what I was going to say, Dr. Greer pretty much covered what my concerns were. The other thing that if you want us to, we can make sure we go back and just double check the numbers if you want us to have traction on that. We put this together probably in the past about 2 hours worth on top of everything else we're doing. So what I'd like to do is one more time just make sure if you folks want me to do this, I will be happy to do it, but I want to make sure we've got the net impact from a revenue standpoint, ADA loss, those kinds of things. I do think the numbers are very close, but I'd want to just check it one more time if you want me to have traction on this.
Trust my head.
Okay. You want to speak?
Yeah, as you go through here, none of these decisions are easy. I can tell you that from my standpoint, this will anger a lot of folks, I understand that. It's easier to administer a classroom at the early grades with 20 students in it. But I'm not aware of a lot of research or any research that says having 21 children in a class versus having 20 or 22 children in a class versus having 20 has a negative impact on student academic performance or on students' social development. I'm just going to toss that out. You've not heard me recommend, nor do I think you will, increasing class sizes in grades 4 and 5 because I think they're high enough, or in grades 6 through 12, as I think they're high enough, again, unless our financial climate gets a lot worse, and it may, and that may be a river you have to look at crossing down the road. But in terms of how to tackle this, there is no easy way. If you want a recommendation from the staff, we'll be glad to produce one, giving you our best thoughts. I can tell you there's nothing on here that's not going to upset a lot of people. I think that you as a board and we as a team have done a good job keeping these cuts as far away from our classroom and as far away from our people and our employees as we could. I think we're now to the point where it could have an impact. Even furloughs have an impact because furloughs take money out of people's pocket. Every one of the things that you're looking at here has a way of taking things away from people's pocket. And the issue with class size is that if you have enough people take you up on the early retirement incentive, then you've got a good chance at being able to make some, if not all of those changes without having to issue pink slips. Even that is a calculated risk because you don't know who's going to retire. And the people that decide to retire may be people like special education teachers or math teachers that you absolutely have to have back.
Well, anybody that you save by this proposal I make, it will have health insurance.
Okay, we have a speaker on Mr. DeBeck's proposal, Francis Vieira, and then Mrs. Nakamura, please.
Good evening. Mr. DeBeck, my name is Francis Fiero. You know who I am. I represent the Office Technical Business Services. I heard you say that the teachers should come in and everybody else shouldn't come in. Who opens the gate? Who answers the phones? Who takes care of the business before the teachers come in?
It's an alternate schedule. You asked me the question, I'll answer it. The point was, I understood that. But the point was that if half the people were working each day, something like opening the gates would happen. I admit there's a lot of things that wouldn't happen, and I understand we're in pain, and okay, so then let's say that we don't do this. That's the board's decision. Okay, if there's anybody else that can come up with $20 to $30 million savings, I'll be very glad to listen to it.
I would love to see the proposal as well that you have. Unfortunately, we didn't get a copy of it, and I think it's very offensive to the people that work so hard.
Fair enough.
And, I just don't understand why you think the teachers would be the ones to be there. Who holds up the schools? Okay, we are the support staff, and if we're not there, you're going to have to, what are the parents going to do?
Well, the reason why the teachers were there is they generate the ADA.
I understand that.
And that's why I made the proposal, because people before were saying...
Who inputs the ADA, Mr. DeBeck?
I'm not debating it. I'm just telling you, I thought of an idea. You want a better one? Do it.
Well, I'm just telling you, my opinion on this is if you're talking about the clerical people and the OTBS, everybody who does the work, we do the work at the schools.
I didn't expect you to be happy.
I understand that, but I have a right to tell you how I feel about it.
Sure.
And I believe I have 3 minutes.
That's true.
Okay? And the way I see it is if you're just thinking the teachers are going to hold up the school, you have another thing coming. Okay, because who's going to do the breakfast in the morning? Who's going to do the free and reduced lunch? Who's going to take care of everybody that comes in that door?
What happens if the school's shut down?
I work myself off at the school site. If you would come over and visit a school site early morning before the teachers get there, then I would understand where you're coming from.
I understand.
But you're giving me an offense, okay? I take offense to that we're not valuable.
That's taken.
Okay? Let me finish my 3 minutes. The bell has not rang. We value our jobs. We take care of the kids and we take care of the parents. And for you to sit there and just say that the teachers need to come in and we're not going to be there, that's wrong, Mr. DeBeck. You need to visit a school site in the morning. It's been a long time, I guess, since you've been there, but it's getting worse if you don't know that with the eliminations that we've had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Nakamura, please.
Yeah, you know, it's always a struggle when you've got, you know, a menu of items like this, and I would like to know my colleagues' priorities and their sense of how they would put things. I've penciled out, just going through, you know, all of this has to be bargained. So putting down what I would do seems, if I were God, seems superfluous. I mean, first of all, I want to know what the four of you think, because that may, I assume, most likely would not, I could guarantee would not line up necessarily perfectly with all of this. But if we took these home with us and penciled out maybe what it is that we as individuals think, it might give staff a better idea of what is on our minds and in our hearts, instead of taking a dartboard at it and just throwing. You know, I've got I think 27.4 million, which probably wouldn't be enough, and it may not be, but it maybe will all line up. Wouldn't that be, you know? I'd recommend that we take this home and, you know, type something out using this format and then come back on Sunday. But sit down, get a chance to talk with our constituents, people that are actually in the schools, whoever it is, talk to our grandmothers, whoever makes sense to us about what, you know, how the schools ought to be run, talk to a kindergarten teacher, talk to clerical, you know, out and who's running the schools, and what would they pick? Or, you know, if we're the ones that push the buttons up here and we have to take the political heat, and just if it's what's inside your own heart alone, that'd be, I think, sufficient. But I think it'd be helpful for staff if we could get something back on Sunday to them before Sunday that actually tells us what each is individuals, and that could be, you know, presented on Sunday so that the public also has the opportunity to see that.
I agree. Tonight was, and we've done one item tonight, and we try to do an item each particular time. I think that each of us do need time to go back and look at each of these and to think about what the final impact is going to be, and so that we could come to a consensus as to which items that we need to move forward to try to negotiate as far as meeting this deficit. Our next meeting is Sunday, scheduled from 2 to 5. And Superintendent and board members, if you have any other questions or suggestions, we're certainly open.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. I think, first of all, you know, it's fine to put everything on the table, ranging from furloughs to cutting classes and everything else. I mean, we're just looking at it, not necessarily accepting it. However, I think the problem on the furlough issue here is kind of an equity issue, which is between teachers, certificated and classified employees. So if there were such a proposal, which I'm not saying that I endorse in any way, I would rather it went something like, okay, if there's 2 days of furlough for teachers, there's 2 days of furloughs for classified and so forth, because even though obviously, in most cases, the classified employees do not earn as much as certificated employees, but a day's lost pay is a day's lost pay. And I understand Mr. DeBeck's position about legally what's required and what is doable, but I think just from that point of view of equity in terms of treating the certificated staff and the classified staff differently is a problem. I just had a couple of comments, even though we're going to discuss this more later.
Can I take just a moment? I feel like I was disrespectful to Mr. DeBeck. When I say talk about penciling out, I mean to include, if that's, you know, what people want, I mean to include
My original
yours,
proposal was every person, or every staff member anyway, but, you know, so this was an accommodate the issue of a legal requirements for a school year. We could go after that too if we wanted to, but, all I do is I look for ideas, and if ideas don't fly, that's okay with me. The point is, if I don't see ideas, then I worry. And I haven't seen many.
Dr. Evans?
Okay, just a few questions on these. I mean, obviously, a comment in terms of the school closure issue needs to be, because all the rumors out there, needs to be addressed very soon, and a decision made about that in terms of next school year, if it's even going to be brought up, which it hasn't been to the board. But, you know, that's something that can't be left hanging, and it's still kind of like the Title I, we still need to look at how can the district operate with a certain number of schools and what can we afford to do, but the issue is what's the most equitable and orderly way to go about making that change. That's one point. Another point is there are increased costs, and you know, one area of increased costs is utility increases, and I've talked with some people who are interested in having getting kids more involved in energy conservation and so forth, and I would, you know, if our energy bill is going up 14%, I would love to have some sort of program that's encouraging the schools to decrease their consumption by 14%.
I thought that we had a program.
Just real quickly, we've got one of the best programs in the country that is widely recognized, and when I first interviewed for the job here, I thought the same thing. And as I went out and visited, I was pleasantly surprised at what we were doing. It's not that we can't do more, don't misunderstand, but I think if you would, if you get a chance, if you go out and look at what we are doing, you will again, you'll be very proud of that particular part of our operations.
Okay.
So maybe the San Diego Gas and Electric territory.
Maybe some savings, but not like what you would think.
The other question has to do, and this is not from a knowledgeable point of view, but in terms of the programs, Balboa Park, Old Town, Palomar, and so forth, the news reports last year that Long Beach, one of the ways they covered their budget shortfall was by charging those families who were financially capable of paying. And just want to know what is the thought, because the way it's listed here is this is the cost of the program and it could be eliminated. And I'm just asking if there is any middle ground there.
I think, again, the issue for the school board has to be, do you let some kids pay when others don't, and you are going to purposefully create, whether there's ill intent or not, which I don't believe there is, a stigma of some kids who can't pay versus some kids who cannot. And quite frankly, before you were to allow that to happen, I'd rather see you to discontinue the program.
Well, these programs had a foundation, which was integration. These programs are the only places in this school district where kids from different schools mix, and they're intentionally matched up so they are cultural, I'll say, opposites or cultural experiences for all the kids. So when you talk to kids that go to Camp Palomar and they are bunking down with the kids that are not like them, they get a lot out of that I think I would support. And that same thing happens for the cultural program in Old Town and also in Balboa Park. So these are the victims of discretionary changes that the state provided for OSILE. It's all part of the TIG funding now, but originally they were entirely funded by integration dollars. Because we were under a consent decree, these programs were part of our consent decree. And so then to just say, well, okay, there may be some of you don't care whether we are integrated or not. That's your choice. But I personally believe that the original decree had merit, and I've seen as a result of the things that happened under Carlin that benefits in my community that maybe some of you have never seen. That's your choice. But I believe that these programs are vital parts of an intercultural experience that every one of our kids should have. I don't believe in staying in their own neighborhood and living with people just like you the rest of your life.
Dr. Evans, are you finished?
No.
Just real quick, though, before we get away from that, I think it's important to point out, you guys talk about we need to do studies. We need to do studies. I know in talking with members of my staff who in the last month have visited these programs, what they have told me is that these programs are not as integrated as they once were. We are much more diverse today than we were when these programs started. So when they started, you may have had schools that were predominantly white and a school that was predominantly not white, and kids getting to know each other and spending time around campfires and bunking out and that kind of stuff. Now you go and you have schools and you look and you think, well, which school is which? Because now the kids, the segregated diversity is not nearly as great today as it was 15 years ago or 20 years ago in this district.
Yes, but if I can on that, this is the one place that there is, you have said that we really should have intercultural training in the district, and this is where the kids actually really do talk a lot about that, where if somebody is, Latino or someone is, Asian or someone's, they do talk about differences and about how to work together, and there's a lot of that goes on.
Promise you, not arguing with you, and
Okay,
staff has also told me when they've gone to visit these sites, some of the very best teaching that they've seen in the district, regardless of what school they were in, they've seen there. So I don't want you to misunderstand that the staff is advocating doing away with this. I'm just simply saying it is something that we're doing extra.
I think that we should go up Sunday on Mount Palomar and be there for Monday.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I think that because the schools are more diverse, there are problems. And just a quick comment, there's certainly the possibility that some schools, that the camp experience would actually help the school blend together more, as opposed to pairing them with another school supposedly for diversity, when they have diversity on their campus that isn't being fully achieved in terms of their interactions. And so I think that's just, like you said, the reality from what it was to what it was now. And so on the same line, and this is because parents who have money have brought things up like this to me, is the issue of the advanced placement. When you apply for, do a college application, you can do a waiver and so forth. I don't think there would be any knowledge that anybody would have as far as who's paying and who's not paying for an advanced placement. That's because a lot of parents are used to paying those fees, and now they don't.
What I'll say to you is I'll be glad for all of you to arrange for all of you to sit down with some of our students, many of whom are student government officials and president of student body associations, and they will tell you students know who pay and students know who don't pay. And I'll just simply say that to you. Now, what we have done is we have gone back and taken a hard look, and Chuck's working on this for us right now. If we do a good job with the students as they fill out the application for to take the SAT and the advanced placement exams, we can get most of those exams that students on free and reduced lunch, we can take care of that and get from most of those to be paid for free. Again, all we're trying to do as a staff is to reduce that stigma, and I can promise you it's real, and it does not go away it just doesn't.
Well, but for example, on the school lunch issue, we decided we wanted to do it in the fairest possible way, with an ID card that no one would know whether it was coming out of their account, whether it's coming out of the free and reduced lunch fund. So, but what you're saying is, even when you have a system like that, people know who's paying and who's not paying, right?
That's exactly right.
So with the school lunch thing, you haven't, even though we've tried to remove the stigma, you're saying everybody already knows anyway.
Well, what happens at the free and reduced lunch period is the kids may know or may not know, but the issue is if I'm standing in line and I can go through the line and I have to give a number and you don't.
No, I understand that, but
it's very clear there. That's not the same issue as taking an AP exam. When you have to go in and register, you have to write a check or you have to give a credit card number. It's different than when you go in. And I promise you, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I can tell you what I know because I've lived it. I don't have to ask parents. I don't have to ask kids. I know this is huge with children. And if you've not been around children, or you yourself have never been from a background where this was an issue, it's different. And I appreciate what parents are saying. I honestly do. And I know we're having a hard time financially, but I can tell you no more than what we're paying for AP exam, given the cost benefit of what it will produce for parents and for kids. I mean, we can talk about this.
Okay, but that's a fine detail.
Actually, it is. It will not amount to a whole lot of money, although I just have an idea that after they've taken the exam, after we've already paid for it, why don't we just send a bill and see who pays?
Well, here's another issue that we're fighting with.
That would be anonymous.
I'll do this quick. Here's another issue that I think you have to think about. We're working with Mark right now to see whether or not, quite frankly, we've been violating the law over the last number of years, because there's some people in the state and on our staff who think that if you require a kid to take a test, which for a kid to get a weighted grade in advanced placement or international baccalaureate, they have to take the exam for them to get a weighted grade. And then you say you're going to require them to pay for the test to have that weighted grade. We think that violates the law.
It does. Okay, that's enough.
Okay.
And so that's a whole different issue that we may have been violating for a number of years.
Yeah, I just had quick questions on numbers 11, 12, and 22. In the red group, yes.
The red group.
So 11 and 12, you've got an asterisk next to both of these items, and I guess the question is, my question is, are both of these items actually subject to bargaining under the collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah, I believe so. Mark, I'd have to defer to you on that. Essentially, 11 and 12, yeah.
I think the real issue is, we got into this last year, if it doesn't have to require bargaining, it's certainly you have to bargain the impacts of it, because you would not be, by eliminating this, you would not be raising the class sizes above the negotiated level, but the impact you would. Now again, particularly, of course, number 12, we're particularly fond of because those dollars are going into some of our most impacted schools.
Yeah, I think that answer is correct. I believe under our existing contract, these changes would fall within our class size provisions.
Yes.
And so they would certainly be subject to impacts negotiations, but not necessarily the decision itself.
And then number 22, I guess what would the ratio go to if we eliminated the
It'd be 25 to 1.
25, it would go from 23 to 25 to 1. Okay. And I guess, I'll just vent for 2 minutes. Again, I just want to just express real appreciation for the work that the staff has done to adjust to these things on the fly with moving targets coming from Sacramento. I guess just my quick thought or recommendation would be, a lot of the work in the blue area is about sort of the operations side of the house, the business side of the house. And now I agree with Ms. Nakamura that all of us need to go and sort of take a shot at this ourselves, including Mr. DeBeck's proposal. But what I'd really appreciate now is a set of recommendations coming from the education side of the house, from the superintendent, about which of these recommendations in the red area carry the least damage to the education of our kids. So I think that would be much appreciated. The venting comes when I compare the level of work and analysis and push that's going on with our staff to what I see going on in Sacramento. I just find it appalling that, in particular, I think about these items like restricting our flexibility on textbooks, that we can get textbook flexibility from that provided, from the state's general fund, but we can't get textbook flexibility from the lottery. It's absurd. The idea that we could go through, the work as a district to identify where we can actually decrease the amount of contracts that we put out to save money, but yet we couldn't use that savings to fill the gap that the state is forcing us to fill is absurd. And it's never enough for us to just vent and point our fingers at the state. We've got the work that we need to do, but we're doing that work. And what I would encourage everybody, publicly, is any member of this legislature that is, particularly on these two items, that feels more compelled to answer to constituencies that want to protect contracts or that want to protect, the purchase of textbooks by school districts when we're in this type of situation, shame on them. Because any of these issues that we now have to confront are going to have direct impact on our kids. And, when we talk about sort of, special interests, paying attention to special interest versus the interests of the kids, we've got people up in Sacramento that, frankly, have no commitment to our public education system. And what they're doing here is an attempt to starve out our public education system because they, frankly, don't care about our kids. They care about people who get contracts from our school districts more than they care about our kids. They care about textbook publishers more than they care about our kids. And it's wrong. I think that the people of this state are better than that, and I encourage the people in this state to make their voices heard, back to Sacramento. But we've got the work that we need to do ourselves. And again, I appreciate the work that James and Dr. Greer that you've been doing, and the rest of the staff.
If there's no other comments, then what we will do, I think it's board consensus, we will take the red list and we will look at it ourselves and think about it. Superintendent, you would take the red list and prioritize it as you feel should be appropriate to meet the needs of our district. And then our next budget meeting is scheduled for Sunday, February 22nd, from 2 to 5.
Yeah, can I make a recommendation on this, that we try and get this back to staff by Thursday so that they can compile it in time for Sunday? Is that without making them work on Saturday again?
No, I'll get mine back, but I won't be here for the Sunday meeting. For 20 years, I have committed to working a 5-day week at a school district, and I have made arrangements with my family to give the weekend is ours. I'm not giving it up. So you guys meet anytime you want, but I will not be meeting on Saturday or Sunday.
Can we still get your
I'll send you
thing
my
by
papers.
Thursday?
I'll send you my papers with my points, but
Okay.
Alrighty then, this meeting is adjourned.
I think it's unfortunate that you...
Thank you, President Jackson. I would like to request that board members please forward your material to Cheryl, who will compile them for us.
Okay.